Hey everyone, it's Nakul from Wicky. Welcome to episode 14 of Wicky's Cricket Podcast. Welcome, Shane. We've got the semi-finals of the Cricket World Cup coming up.
Hi, Nakul. Hi. Yeah, it's that's what we're here to talk about. We're recording this on the Tuesday. Um, Man, we're getting so close to the end of the World Cup, and we're finally into the knockout round. See, this is why I think the World Cup should have more knockout games because
Mm.
it's all high stakes. It's all okay. This is not the place to talk about what I think is wrong with the World Cup
It's
format,
it's
but yeah. So we're gonna have the first semi-final um, tomorrow. Tomorrow, sort of 2 p.m. IST, 7:30 in on the east coast of Australia. It's India v New Zealand at Mumbai. Surely this is it. I think we should just dive right in. Surely this is it. Surely this is India's destiny.
Man, this is so typical. You're looking to actually dive straight into the games. I wanted to tell a long-winded story about how I tried to find my India hat, and it took me the best part of 5 minutes to look around my house. But no, I'm very excited. I think I've been telling you throughout the World Cup that I've been struggling to get my friends out of their houses to actually watch some games together. But knockout games, and I think we've got 7 or 8 people ready to go. It's 7:30 p.m. start in Australia, so I think we'll have some dinner, have a couple of
Hmm.
beers, tuck into hopefully India racking up 350 plus and getting it done so we can have a nice early night's sleep. But as we know, there's always more to it with knockout games. I think I literally said to Sashane when we were discussing this pod, "Hey, look, I usually go off on tangents and go on and all over the place, but with India playing the semifinals, I'm definitely going to do that. So I'll let you um, have a bit of talk a bit of sense and just set up the game India New Zealand first on the Wednesday, and I'll go into my 5 minute long rambling rant after that.
Sure. So, just a couple of things that I think stood out to me right away in terms of the actual game, in not just India's destiny. Um, but so this is going to be the first time that New Zealand played Mumbai, I think, in this tournament. So I think they're obviously like coming up against a home team, the host team in red hot form. Everyone's sort of on it. Last group game against Netherlands, you saw KL Rahul and Shreyas Iyer make hundreds. You've got everyone's sort of on. I think it's New Zealand are heading into this as um, underdogs.
Participants.
Um, Yeah, they're heading into this as underdogs, um, and probably doubly so if they have to um, chase. I think it's the shape of this game. I think given what we've seen at Mumbai so far in this World Cup, the shape of this game might be decided by the toss. Um, I think New Zealand. I mean, maybe New Zealand will enjoy being the underdogs. I think it's just might free them up to play a little bit. They've got the tools to hurt India. Um, but I think it just also comes back to the unfamiliar conditions as well.
Mm.
And this is something that's true for Australia in their semi-final as well. Neither New Zealand or Australia have played at their respective semi-final venues, but their opponents have. And I think it's just so like it's so overwhelmingly stacked. Like they're so overwhelmingly sort of the stacked in favor of India, like the hopes and the form guide. And we saw what happened in the league game at Dharamshala, and we saw all of this stuff happen. And surely they win it, and surely they advance to the World Cup final.
Man, I think whilst you've been speaking, it reminds me of like that meme or the little GIF or GIF about the person's just saying, hold me back," and he's just ready to go. Literally, as you were talking, I've got the perfect mixture of an Indian living in Aussie. I've got my India hat ready to go, and I've got an iced latte in my hand, and I'm just thinking, "Oh, hold me back," because once I start, I'm gonna go on and on. Now, I think like everything you said there, Shane, I think makes sense. I'll try to speak a little bit of sense before I let my emotions take over. But no, I think with the game itself, I think it's really easy to say that India's won 9 in a row. India's looked excellent. New Zealand's lost, I think, 3 games, maybe even four. I think they might have actually lost 4 games, but they've lost 3 or 4 games. They've looked far from perfect. They've had injury issues. They lost quite relatively comfortably to India the last time they played. They haven't played in Mumbai, so it's really easy to build a case for India, and I will go on to do more of that. But I think very quickly with New Zealand, the thing that I guess genuinely worries me is that Bolt and Santner, you've got two absolutely elite A-class bowlers. On the other side, you've got Ravindra just batting absolutely excellently. You've got Conway, who can get the job done in India. Daryl Mitchell in the form of his career. Kane Williamson, that is an elite batting lineup with like a Glenn Phillips or maybe Jimmy Neesham to finish off. So I think I have been nervous with India throughout the tournament as you grow up to be as an Indian fan. But I think there is genuine reason to think that it's not like New Zealand or a Pakistan or an Afghanistan who, shocked their way into the semi-finals. New Zealand are genuinely an elite team. You got to remember they were one shot away from chasing down 389 against Australia on a day where it looked like Australia was going to score 450, 500, name your score.
Yeah.
It looked like Australia was going to get the job done. And they did that from memory without Kane Williamson that day, I think, as well.
I don't think he played. Did he play that game? He certainly didn't play the India game against Dharamshala. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think there's a really there's no way I'm thinking, oh yeah, India will win easily against New Zealand. New Zealand definitely have a lot of threats, but and that's it for my sense making cricket chat for the India New Zealand game. We will be talking about Australia South Africa, by the way. So if you're an Aussie fan, I promise you this won't all be about the first semi-final. But I think the one thing that I wanted to kind of get into from this game's point of view, and I will focus on India real quick here. If you are an Indian cricket fan growing up, especially if you're a little bit older like me, you're in your 30s now, you lived through the 90s, you lived through the 2000s. I think you grow up with this sense of India will give you hope and let you down at the last moment. And I think, it's literally, I mentioned to Sushane in our prep, I was saying there's a movie called Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham, one of the most well-known movies of all time in Bollywood. And there's literally a scene where Shah Rukh Khan, the guy who's involved with KKR, he literally looks around to his family, I think it's brother or whatever, and goes, "Oh, with India, you never know." And like that's such a quintessential moment of an Indian kid growing up. You watch that movie, and you hear your parents say it, you hear your grandparents say it, everyone around. There's that. If they're not saying it, they used to think it like, "Oh, with India, you just never know." And I guess we've been fortunate. If you're a little bit younger, you're a teenager or in your early 20s. You probably haven't seen that phase of, India letting you down consistently, aside from knockout finals, of course. But I think just it's beautiful going from the 90s and the 2000s of you just never know, you just can't quite back on India, to now this team of having 3 gun fast bowlers, elite bowling attack, and just bossing the 9 in a row of the regular stage of the World Cup. So I think it's just been quite a journey, which I really wanted to talk about from a fan perspective. From a cricket perspective, I think the biggest factor for India, yes, bowl like on on the field, it'll be the bowling attack. I think we've just got an elite bowling attack. I trust all 5 of those guys. The biggest factor for India, in my opinion, is Rohit Sharma. Reason I say that, I think I'm big on mentality. I'm big on sort of like, the building of teams, etc., etc. Rohit Sharma in the last sort of couple of years during the IPL, during a lot of white ball cricket, was the guy who was kind of in the later stages of his career, got given the captaincy, had a couple of good knocks, but in white ball cricket in the T20 World Cup last year especially, there was a lot of chat around like his IPL stats being brought up, and they're not great. They're not great for the last 4 or 5 seasons. And that was actually starting to piss me off because, as an Indian cricket fan, I'm not one to say, oh, you haven't won finals for 10 years, etc., etc. I think that's like a really easy cop-out. I think the direct thing to say was, what the hell is he doing opening the batting as captain and not having that intent that they go on about? And I think, like, I haven't watched as much white ball cricket until the World Cup and probably the last couple of months before. What's been really clear is Rohit Sharma, as a leader and as an opening batsman, has stepped up. And I think the most impressive thing is everyone in that top 7 plays their role. Rohit Sharma is not playing his role. He's playing the role that he's defined for himself as the captain of India. And I think as a fan, as someone who was born in India, takes a lot of pride in following the cricket team, I think that's what's most impressive. He's not a role player. He's carved out this role to say, hey, I'm telling you to show intent. I'm telling you to put the team above yourself. And hey, I'm going to be the one that goes out and does it. And I forgot which game this was, but there was, I think it might have been India, South Africa, where Virat Kohli had a few dot balls. He tried to slog one out the park and got out for a duck. Was that India? Bavuma got the catch, I think it was.
No, what?
England? Am I saying this
Well,
wrong?
England, I think it was England where he
Sorry,
was
sorry.
caught in mid-off,
Mid
wasn't he?
off,
Yeah.
yes, he was. Yeah, sorry, I got the team wrong, but that to
Hmm.
me, I think I might have said this on a previous podcast. I definitely said this to my friends. Of Rohit Sharma is paving the path to say, put the team in front of yourself. I'll go out and do it. I'll put my average and my centuries and my stats on the line in a home World Cup, and I'll show you how it's done. And I think Virat Kohli doing it that day, yeah, look, India was obviously strong favorites, right? But I think him doing that day, going against his natural accumulating style, for me, that was huge. As a fan, I was like, you got Virat Kohli, the biggest sort of, well, celebrity in India in cricketing sense, doing that and actually listening to what the team motto is. And then also at other times, obviously, Rohit Sharma's got out, and then Virat Kohli's played the more sensible role. But yeah, Rohit Sharma, I forgot about all the other points that I mentioned. I'm going all in on Rohit Sharma and his batting. But any sort of final thoughts from you on India, New Zealand?
Yeah, just to, I think a couple of things that sort of really do come up. I think that last point you mentioned is really, really important. When
Mm.
Rohit gets out, it's on Kohli.
Yeah.
And I just sort of think about, let's say the toss goes in New Zealand's way. We've seen that they have the batting firepower. We know that they put on 400 against Pakistan at a small ground. They came very close to chasing 389 against
Nine.
Australia. Um, Rachin's batting like a dream at the moment, um, making big runs at the top. And I just think that what if the toss and the shape of the match does fall in New Zealand's favor? Let's say they do bat first and they do put on like a big score, and then they do catch India under lights, which is one thing that I've heard being sort of like bandied about as like that's their best hope, right? That
Yeah.
they catch India under lights. Bolton's how they do their damage. They have Santner backing them up through the middle, just to sort of like stifle any possible middle order resistance. And I just think, um, do you think that like I know that middle order can make runs. We've seen that, but can they make those runs in a knockout game without Rohit or Kohli with them? That's the thing that comes to mind because I wonder if New Zealand get a big enough target, or like if they get a big enough target, then let's say I don't think they'll have to do that much damage upfront in order to win the game. Like, I don't think they'll have to get India to 91 for 7, just to be sure of winning that game. I
Mm.
wonder if I wonder if like let's say with the 300 plus total on the board, getting them let's say 3 down would be enough. Um, because then you can just stifle the scoring through the middle in the knowledge that as many runs as Shreyas Iyer and
Rahul.
Jadeja and like Rahul have made, can they really play that kind of match-winning knock? And can they pilot a run? Can they pilot a run chase in like a really important game?
Yep.
That's something that I always just think about. Can the middle order win the game in case of early damage up front if they bat second?
Yep, awesome. Well, we'll finish off with this one and then we'll get into Australia, South Africa because I'm super keen to rip into that as well. I think
Yeah.
just to answer your last question there, 100%, I think so. Because, and I'll tell you why as well. I think in previous World Cups, like, it's funny, like, I'm such a passionate Indian supporter, but I also am cricket obsessed. So, when we went into the 2019 World Cup, when we went into when we went into the WTC final, when we lost against Australia earlier this year, we
Hmm.
went
Hmm.
into, I think it was the T20 World Cup last year. I think I'll talk
Yeah.
about the WTC final as like me trying to express that I'm not totally one-eyed when it comes to analyzing the game. I think going to that game without Bunt and Bumrah, I was just like, come on, you got Australia at the peak of their powers. Yes, they were neutral conditions, but you've got Australia like literally ready to go, and you got an Indian team and the batting lineup, the averages of the stats have been poor. Bunt has been the highest averaging batsman for
Yeah.
a couple of years. He's not playing. Boomer is definitely our best bowler. He's not playing. It's not looking great. Whereas with this, what I see is you've literally got numbers 1 to 5, and everyone has pulled their weight multiple times in different scenarios. The only I guess question mark is obviously Hardik Pandya's missing. But then you've replaced him with Surya Kumar Yadav, who on his day can be similar to Maxwell, and then you've replaced him with Shami's bowling. So I think like in an odd way, what I was most concerned about has now almost become a huge strength for India. And then you've got Jadeja at number 7, and you know, I've probably talked about this on another pod. I'm huge on team building, and I'm huge on where these guys are at there in terms of age and experience in terms of their career. And I think, like, in terms of age, we've either, like, there's no one that's past it. You know, Rohit and Virat would be the ones that are closest, but in white ball cricket, especially this format, they are actually in really good form. This isn't Test cricket. This isn't T20 cricket where you could argue they've been a bit up and down. In this format, they're still producing the runs. You got KL, Rahul, and Shreyas Iyer, 4 and 5. They've done the job multiple times. I think they're both either side of 30. I think they're sort of, I think Shreyas Iyer's late 20s or 30.
Yeah, it's 31. Yeah.
31 or so.
Shreyas is about 28, 29. Yeah.
Exactly. You got Gill, number 1 red batsman in the world, etc., etc. I won't go on about him. So your top 5, you don't even ask any questions, right? Like, I think it would be ideal to have Kohli or Rohit hang around and get through the innings. But if not, you've got 3 other guys that could do the job. And then I think with Sky instead of Pandya, you've got the upside of like an actual batsman, not as much international experience, but he dominates the IPL. And then you got Jadeja, absolute peak left-hand batsman, has done it so many times for India where he's had to save innings. I think he could definitely play in all the pressure situations and all that kind of thing. So I think batting-wise, I am genuinely confident, even if India is, hopefully they're not 3 for 10 or 20, but even if they get to say 3 for 50, I think it actually works out okay because they know that they don't have to go hard in the middle. I think this, one of the things, I think Jared Kimber might have mentioned that a real worry for India is the fact that they don't have that number 8 who can bat. And in a typical, 380 on 380 type of game in the regular group games, I think that would have definitely been a concern because you know that except for Rohit, everyone else might have that in the back of their mind. But I think in a final, I just don't see teams scoring 380. I know it's at Mumbai. I just don't see New Zealand scoring 350 plus against India's bowling attack, even if it is at Mumbai. So I think in a normal game, which will be in that sort of 270 to 320 type of area, I think India, even if they are, say, 3 for 30 or 3 for 50, just need to sort of fight back through the middle overs. And if you just picture in a chase, someone like a Virat Kohli, but even if it is a Rahul or an Iyer, right, that actually suits them perfectly. Bat 10, 15 overs, get yourself into the game. You know that you could probably go, you wouldn't want to go hard at Santner and probably not Bolt either, but you know you can probably attack one of the others through the middle. So anyways, for the first time in my adult life as an Indian fan, I actually feel confident going into a knockout game.
No, it's really interesting that you have a lot of faith. You have so much faith in this middle order. In fact, I just think back to the last time these two played in the World Cup semi-final, which is in the last one in England, and they didn't have that many to chase, but there was a lot of damage that these guys did early, which is like that's exactly the template that let's say if New Zealand were to repeat, which is like Henry and Bolt did like a lot of damage early, and then because Santner came in and did what he does, he was difficult to get away. So I remember Hardik and Rishabh Pant sort of mounted a bit of a comeback. Like I highly doubt that they would have managed to get those runs on their own, which they didn't. It's that's the sort of kind of shape of the match that I think of, and the kind of concern that we can sort of.
But I think we will move on.
We
will move on to Australia, South Africa. But I think like that's exactly my point. In years gone by, I never trusted that middle order in white ball cricket. Right? It was who was it? You just mentioned Pant. It was Hardik Pandya. It was Dhoni. It was a Dhoni who was past it. It was a Pant who shouldn't have been in the squad, let alone the team. And it was a Pandya who hadn't had these 2 years of IPL as like a genuine sort of top three, number 3, 4, like batting a lot, getting a lot of runs. And then you replace that with who we have now. I think there's just like a world of difference. So I think just like actually having 5 proper batsmen just makes a huge difference in terms of my confidence. But hey, my confidence doesn't matter when they're in a semi-final chasing down the runs. But just very quickly, I know you'll set up the Australia-South Africa game, but actually this drags me perfectly over to Australia-South Africa. If you remember, I'm pretty sure I said this on the pod and on my friends group chat. I remember saying before Australia-South Africa in the group stages that Australia is not good enough in terms of their batting order. And I'm still looking at the head Marsh Warner, excellent, like great top 3, a lot of power. But against a truly elite, like a really good bowling attack. They actually, someone tried to sort of argue this with me the other day, and then I looked at it where Australia convincingly lost to South Africa when they were pre-game favorites, and I personally thought, how the hell are they pre-game favorites? This was before Travis Head was in the team. Now we come
Yes.
to a
Yeah.
semi-final, and it's almost like the betting markets have been sort of phrased as if like an Aussie fan is setting them, because there is no way the Australian team is better than South Africa. Maybe in an elimination final, if the toss goes their way and South Africa are chasing, I would say 50-50, like the toss went Australia's way, 50-50. On paper, you've got 3 out of Smith, Labuschagne, Inglis, and Stoinis. You've got 3 out of those 4 that will be in that sort of positions 4 to 7, right? That is not good enough for a 50 over batting order when you compare it to especially India, South Africa. And I even think New Zealand's batting order is probably better than Australia's. Australia's got a little bit more firepower with Maxwell, but I think Maxwell arguably played the best one-day innings of all time. But people still forget that his 200 was against Afghanistan. Of course, it was on one leg, 91 for 7. I fully respect that. But he got a 200 against Afghanistan and 100 against Netherlands. And I don't remember all the scores, but he hasn't done a whole heap outside of that, right? So I think for me, and it's, yeah, can you confidently back that Australian batting order? Yeah, what are your thoughts?
I just think it's funny that you say Maxwell hasn't done very much outside of the greatest one-day innings ever played.
Yeah, like I've said that a few times. It's just like I
It's
think
just funny, that's all.
individually, yeah, it is the best innings of all time, pretty much. But then you've got, if you look at
Yeah.
it, like who he's got in that against. Anyways, I digress.
Hmm.
Let's take your
Um,
2 cents on the game.
I mean, I think what you said about batting first versus chasing is, I think, like a really important thing for Australia v South Africa. We saw this with South Africa a couple of times in this tournament. They just about beat Pakistan in Chennai by 1 wicket.
Yep,
The famous Keshav Maharaj celebration and
fist,
all of that.
chest
Yeah.
bump. Yep,
And I think they also chased against Afghanistan in their last game, which it wasn't, I mean, that was nowhere near as close, but like maybe when Miller got out, there was like a small window there, like maybe. But we know how good South Africa are if they bat first. I also want to point out that 3 of the 4 wins at Eden Gardens, there have been 3 out of 4 wins batting first at Eden Gardens in this World Cup. Um, is it game over if South Africa bat first? A combination of how the venue has played and how um how lethal they are batting first. Um
I
and
think the
yeah,
only thing that I'd
it's
say, I've said this to you and Rachel before, is like it's such small sample sizes, and we don't know who those
hmm,
4 teams were. Like if you've got like a stronger team versus a minnow in 1 or 2 of those, that throws out the data. Plus,
yeah.
it was only 4 games, but it is a
Hmm.
good point. Yeah,
Yeah, maybe it's just something to think about, even
mm,
how this world where you play this World Cup. The most recent of those wins, by the way, was England against Pakistan in their last group games, just
yep.
like literally right now.
Mm.
So yeah, I wonder if, and given how we've seen how Australia have bowled, it's amazing that they're sort of like finished third and into a World Cup semi-final, and people are sort of like saying, "Oh, this is World Cup Australia. They're back. They're this, they're that," and they haven't been that. If India's the sort of like if India's the sort of top of this World Cup in terms of form and how well they're playing, then Australia are probably um I don't even want to say further back than third, but that's quite a gap, I think, between those two.
Yep.
In terms of how well they played, you can talk about how Stark is bowled, how it's really been Zappa that's been getting the job done for them. You talked about the batting. We talked about some of the lack of batting form with some of the fringe guys, like some of the sort of not necessarily fringe guys, but some of the all rounders and players in the middle order, Stonis and Green and those guys. Smith has, I think, had a few 50s, not really made a big score just yet.
Not an impressive
Um,
50 though. It's I think I heard the great cricketer summarize his 64 off 65 or whatever it was against Bangladesh is like, like he got the runs, but he didn't look great. I don't know.
yeah,
They're going to have to drop
and
one of him and Labuschagne, I believe, or if they play both, then Stoinis is out, and that's one of your bowling options out. So it's going to be interesting.
yeah, Yeah, it's just it's I think there are some selection questions to be addressed before that semi-final. Maxwell's obviously going to come back into the team that played against Bangladesh, so there's going to be at least one change there. It's going to be some other, I think. But let's see what else they do there. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Mitch Marsh though. He's potentially a match winner if he comes off. And we know about how much better Steve Smith is batting at number three in one days than at number four. But also the thing with Mitch Marsh is he's a bit vulnerable early on. So he'll either get out in the single figures or he'll make a big score just
Mm,
and look like $1 million and just trash all the short
yeah.
bowling and just like look really good against spin and all of that. But if let's say he does get out early, which is entirely within the realms of possibility,
Mm,
as has happened for him, um, Smith is effectively the number three anyway, and I think that might sort of force Australia to like change plans midway and play a very different type of game in that semi-final. Like if Mitch Marsh is if it's Mitch Marsh batting with Head or Warner, then they can just sort of like tee off on the fast bowling given just how good they are at scoring quickly. But if
yeah.
Smith comes in, if Marsh gets out early, let's say for 8 or 9 or whatever, and then Smith comes in, I think we could see Australia sort of change plans mid innings
Yes.
and suddenly sort of like start playing a very different kind of game.
Yeah.
And I think then in that scenario, Maxwell becomes even more important, because like you really need him to accelerate at the death. I think that South African fast bowling can be hit. We saw what happened in that game against India at Calcutta, where um, they sort of safely played out Maharaj and just went to town on everybody else, on
Yeah.
Janssen, on Shamsi, on Gidi as well. I think Australia in a weird way can learn from India, um, which is they've got a template for handling Maharaj at Calcutta, which is
Yeah.
I think you would have seen that game, right? You would have seen how
Yes.
Virat Kohli and Shreyas Iyer batted against Keshav
Yeah,
Maharaj.
but I
They
think there's
realized
just
that,
a huge, sorry to cut you off, but there's just a
yeah,
huge
yeah.
difference between the Indian batting order and the Aussie batting order in these
Sure.
conditions. And I think
Oh,
like
sure. Yeah.
the this has been something that like I'm pretty pessimistic. Even though India is playing almost perfect cricket, I'm nervous. I'm pessimistic as hell, right? But I think like India's almost kind of broken this World Cup because teams have looked reasonable against other teams, right? For example, like South Africa got made to look like absolute crap when they played India, but then they went and
Mm.
played against Australia and they beat them, I think, by over 100 runs and close to 150 runs.
From the tournament. Yeah.
South Africa got over
Mm.
300, and I think Australia got about 170. So comfortable win, right? So I think just one last point that I wanted to make very quickly is that I think if you're
Mm.
an Aussie fan, there's definitely reason to have hope. You know, you got 7:30 p.m. this Thursday. There is reason to have hope. It's finals cricket Australia. It's a powerful top three. It's Smith and Labuschagne
Mm.
in the middle. I guess Australia is like the safer option in this game, where I don't see them
Mm.
crumbling just because they do have that skill of Smith and Labuschagne, and then they still have
Mm.
Maxwell to come. The bowling attack is the bowling attack. We all know what they can do. Um, but I think with South Africa, I think if they can win this game, it would be a victory for cricket. On paper, I've been saying this the whole time. They are a better team. They've got De Kock last
Yeah.
World Cup. They've got Van der Dussen. They've got Markram. They've got
Akram,
Klaassen, Miller,
Miller.
Janssen at 7. Is that right? Janssen at 7?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds
and they've
right.
got
Yeah.
an out of form Bavuma who's done his hammy, who might not play. He would be replaced by Hendricks, who scored I think 180 or maybe 280s in the time that he has replaced Bavuma previously. So their batting order is A, good, B, powerful. Whereas Australia, you've kind of got like a mix of half your guys have gotten big scores and looked great and are sort of powerful, and then you've got guys who are just not fit for modern one-day cricket. So it's a bit inconsistent there. Australia's bowling attack is Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins have the reputation, but none of them have kind of been great this World Cup. They've all had good games, but then Stark's conceded 21 wides in one game. So there's a
Mm.
bowling attack who played a lot of cricket this year. And then okay, fine. That's balanced with Zampa, who's arguably been the bowler of the tournament or very close to it.
Mm.
So I think if you're an Aussie
Mm.
fan, there's definitely a reason to have hope. But I would say that South Africa is definitely the better team going to this game. And honestly, it's all about the toss. If you're an Aussie fan and Australia back
Mm.
first and South Africa chasing, it's going to be a game worth staying up for. But if South Africa back
Mm.
first and rack up 330, 350, maybe go to bed and watch the KO highlights the next morning. But anyways,
Oh boy.
so what is it today?
Uh,
Tuesday. We're going to be doing a
yes.
pod on Friday after we know the results of both semifinals, a couple of days before the World Cup final. So obviously we'll know the results of these games and we can see how
Yep.
right or wrong we both were. But I
Mostly
think
wrong, most likely.
yeah, we'll see, we'll see. But I was telling you that I've been watching a little bit more WBBL, obviously with less World Cup games
Mm.
on. It's been good fun to actually get into it and talk on the Discord with a few of the guys and follow some of the players a bit more closely. Let's wrap up
Mm.
with a quick WBBL update for everyone.
Sure. So the WBBL has it's actually getting quite interesting, sort of at the top of the table and in the race for qualifying for finals. Scotches are not top; they've sort of really hit their stride with Divine, with Mooney, etc. If you've been sort of like looking anywhere around WBBL social media, you'll see that both of them have made hundreds. Sydney Thunder are doing really well. Sixers are back in the mix. Heat Strikers. It's this is far from settled. I think we're heading for a very exciting finish to the season, especially heading into the Stadium Series where they're going to be playing at the MCG and SCG and Adelaide Oval, etc.
Nice.
So it's I think it's sort of heating up, like it's sort of heading for a very interesting finish. I thought, however, this is sort of usually the part of the show where we do a little bit of analysis, a little bit of numbers, etc. And I thought I would look at something that was really interesting. It really caught my eye. So you might know that we've got a dedicated T20 player stats portal for women's T20 cricket, T20 league cricket, and sort of we've got all kinds of like really cool stats on there. And I thought one thing that I could do today is maybe look at some of the numbers and a particular case and sort of talk through something that's been happening in the WBBL this season that really caught my eye and could use that tool to talk about it. Now, essentially, what I'm going to talk about is how the scheduling of games this season has helped one of the Brisbane Heat players, the seamer Courtney Sippel. Um, it's quite interesting. So she's played 9 games this season, and she's taken 10 wickets. Um, it's pretty good. I'm solid. She's averaging 25 overall, which is fair enough. That's pretty good. But interestingly, she's played 3 out of her 9 games at North Sydney Oval this year, and she's got 8 out of her 10 wickets at this particular ground, which is very interesting. Um, Last year, she only played 1 game at North Sydney Oval. And what were her overall stats? She got 12 wickets in 14 games at 30, which is noticeably worse there. Which I thought, hey, this is interesting. Um, and I also realized that, and I'm going to sort of, I think it's a good idea to sort of share my screen now and talk a little bit about it.
Yep.
Um, Here we go. This is the sorry. This is the T20 player stats portal. So you can use the drop downs here on the left hand side, which will probably be at the top of your screen if you're using on mobile. And you can sort of either type in the names that you want or scroll through the drop downs. And I thought it was really interesting to look at how she's bowled at various different venues. You'll also notice that Sippel tends to bowl quite well tends to bowl quite well in Tasmania. She's got six. She's got a strike rate of 10 at Blunston, and she's taken 3 wickets here, averaging 21 at. Sorry, I confuse the names. Blunston, Bellerive, University of Tasmania. Let me just read
Yeah,
read
yeah,
off
yeah.
what's on here.
Yep,
So
sure.
Aurora Stadium, yeah, she's taken 6 wickets at Aurora Stadium, 3 at Bellerive Oval. She actually bowls quite well in Tasmania, which is interesting. So it's in addition to North Sydney Oval, where you can see she's taken 7 wickets just off 90 balls before this season, and those numbers have probably only gone up now because it's now 15 wickets. Now the total is 15 wickets, and she's got an average of 15, like doing really well. Yeah. What I thought was really interesting to point out is she's got it's it's a very interesting case of 8 wickets at North Sydney Oval, 2 wickets at Hobart this season, um, and literally 0 wickets everywhere else. And I think she's played like 3 or 4 grounds besides. Like there's Junction Oval in there. There's Junction Oval. There's Mackay. There's um, there's I think two or three other grounds.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's something else, and she's taken literally 0 wickets there. You can see kind of here with Junction Oval, she's bowled a little bit there in the past and not done very well. But I thought it was really interesting to point out because sort of way back in 2021, where she had actually had a much better season. She played. And this is back when they were still playing in COVID bubbles. So they started off the WBBL in Tasmania. Then they moved to I think then they played at Mackay. Then they played at North Sydney. Then they played at like two or three of these like bubbles I think.
yeah,
So yeah, and I think back then I feel like at least part of her success was due to playing at those favorable venues. And I sort of I think that was really interesting to point out because back in 2021 she played 3 games in Tasmania and 4 games at Mackay, which is another one of the favored venues that you just saw. She's taken
yes.
6 wickets there and averages 25. Um, so I mean, moreover, and surprise, she finished the season 2021 season with 12 wickets at 17. Um, so she's kind of I sort of wrote in my notes that she's the opposite of venue agnostic. All 10 wickets this year for her have come at just 2 grounds, literally zero everywhere else. I
Love it.
thought it was and I should also point out that let's say that one game that she played at North Sydney last year she went wicketless. And this year she has played at Mackay this year. Didn't take a wicket in that game either. But Sippel strikes me as the kind of player who, if she gets 2 games at a particular venue, she'll probably haul in one of them.
Mm.
And I think it's really interesting to point out this year because um, I mean, in the past sort of couple of seasons or so, she'd at least get 1 wicket at an unfavored venue. But this year, it's literally nothing. It's literally her sort of like her 2 favorite venues, which is North Sydney Oval and somewhere in Tasmania, where she's got all of her wickets, and
Yeah,
she's got none at the sort of at the 3 or 4 other venues uh,
yeah,
uh, that she's played at. Unfortunately for her, Heat have only played one home game at Mackay, um, which is one of her favorite venues this year. She played. I mentioned that just a few seconds ago. And 3 of the Heat's remaining 5 games are at Alan Border Field, which is and like not so.
yeah.
I just sort of screen share again, and I'll go back here. But 3 of the Heat's remaining 5 games are at Alan Border Field, which is where they have which is where they have most of their home games this season. So the WBBL, as with the BBL, tends to use multiple home grounds in a single season, and that keeps changing season to season. But she's taken only 1 wicket at Alan Border Field and averages 66.
Yeah.
So that's clearly not a great venue for her. And the Heat played 3 out of the remaining 5 games there, and I think they also played Junction Oval where she's wicketless and concedes 10 and over, and I think one other ground where she's not done too great.
Well, I was
Um,
gonna say, so Shane, like the cool thing for me,
yeah.
and I think most people that obviously like don't follow the
Mm,
WBBL every single day or don't watch every game. I think the coolest part is like living in Australia, WBBL is at the perfect time, and it's just a case of like if you don't have much work on or it's a nice time of the day, you flick it on. So Shane's usually been
mm,
sort of sending us a couple of insights every day in terms of, oh, this might be a good matchup, etc., etc. And it's kind of like just an easy way to get into the tournament. I found that a lot of my friends,
mm,
the way they got into the NBA was it was during the working day. They might put a bet on or a multi on or whatever, and it's just like that thing in the back of your mind that you just check the score every now and then. You might not be watching it, you might be working, but it's just something
mm,
nice to follow. So I thought I'd just very quickly
mm,
finish off with I was having a look at the WBBL ladder as you were talking about it, and I noticed that
mm.
Adelaide and Brisbane have both lost 3 games each at third and fourth on the ladder, and
Yeah.
Sydney Sixers and Hobart have both lost 5 games each, and they're 5 and 6. So I think that third to sixth are
Mm,
only separated by a couple of games. And I think it's like that. What is now? Every team is sort of 4 or 5 games to go. So I think it's sort of that crunch time where Sixers and Hobart are pretty much now playing for their seasons. So it's going to be really interesting to follow.
mm,
And obviously, like I
mm,
think the World Cup. Yeah, we're doing another podcast in a couple of days covering the final. So we'll do a really quick WBBL wrap up there, but we're coming to the end of that. So it should be good to follow. And obviously, when the WBBL finals are coming up, we'll go a little bit deeper into our analysis purely on that. And we'll be able to do it in person because I'll be in India with Sashane real
mm.
soon. So we'll be able to actually do these pods in person. But aside from that, it was nice to dust off the Indian hat. We'll obviously let you know if India don't win. I don't know if I can back myself up for the pod on Friday, but yeah, it's it's going to be a nervous couple of days. But yeah, as always, you can Google Wicky Linktree. The pod that we're doing now will be on YouTube, Spotify, and everywhere else where you listen to your podcast. We're also doing one with a couple of my mates covering NBA and EPL. I'm doing one with Jacob from Tripod covering NFL and NBA. And so Shane and I are doing one for BBL Supercoach, which I know will be super popular. It's only preseason now, but we're only about 3 weeks away. So got a ton of content. Google Wicky Linktree. It's all free. And we'll catch you in 3 days from now before the World Cup final.